Good afternoon, preppers. Welcome to another edition of Goshen Prepping. Listen, today's video, compared to others especially, is huge. This is such a devastating video, which scares me even, because I want you to understand this video is going to show and prove to you we are heading into World War III, and the results heading into that is going to probably blow your mind, because it has me as well. All right, first off, if you know me, I love to study history, because history is a great teacher, because it tends to repeat itself, doesn't it? And what we're going to do specifically in history is we're going to compare two presidents and show you the reason for this, obviously, as we go through it: Franklin D. Roosevelt and, of course, Joe Biden. And you're going to be amazed at the comparisons, because there are lots of them. There's actually been articles about this too. In fact, Biden has even admitted there's amazing comparisons between these two presidents. But it's the end result that's going to blow you away. And it truly frightens me what's coming, and you'll see. All right, let's go ahead and jump into our first comparison. Let's take a look at our parallels. FDR versus Biden. FDR won an election at the beginning of the Great Depression, 1933, toward the beginning anyway. Biden won the election at the beginning of the pandemic. Both had catastrophic results on the economy and the country. FDR held office during massive unemployment. Biden also held office during massive unemployment. Okay, there's a lot more. FDR established the office of censorship. Of course, his goal was loose lips sink ships, and it was all about intelligence keeping America safe. Biden tried to establish the Disinformation Governance Board, but it was not about keeping America safe at all. It was about everybody trying to see things the way he sees them, or more specifically, his puppeteers. FDR, if you didn't know, originally sided with the Nazis. Because I don't know if you know it, FDR actually sent representative diplomats to pro-Nazi rallies. Right here in the United States, first off, there was actually a huge one. I think it was in Madison Square Garden, but in New York City, they actually had a giant statue or picture of George Washington with the American Stars and Stripes basically adorned with swastikas right next to it. And he actually sent diplomats there. And at the very beginning, there was a lot of Americans who were pro-Nazi, FDR being one of them. Now, more specifically, as time went on, he actually started sending diplomats to Nuremberg to attend the Nazi rallies there as well. Now, the worst part about this, he actually sent oil executives to Nazi Germany too, to meet with Hitler specifically. This eventually led to the American Standard Oil Company making rubber, you ready for this, specifically for the Nazi war machine, but shutting it off for America and wouldn't sell it actually here in the United States. Sounds kind of interesting, doesn't it? Sounds kind of a comparison to what some things Biden does. Biden originally sided with Russia. Yes, he did. It started off, Putin invaded Crimea, the little annex at the bottom of Ukraine, in 2014. And he wanted to continue on into Ukraine as well, by the way. But the problem was this, and I don't know if you know this, that at that time, Putin sold a copious amount of gas and oil and such to Europe, and the pipelines that delivered it from Russia to Europe went right through Ukraine. And it was dangerous for him to basically start invading Ukraine at the time, back in 2014, because it may actually cut off his money flow and his supply of cash coming in to stockpile his war machine, as it would. In 2015, Putin began the Nord Stream 2, which even recently in the news, we've been talking about this. It was an undersea pipeline that went straight through the Baltic, straight from Russia to Europe. So that way it basically would give a different delivery route going to Europe instead of actually having to go through Ukraine. In other words, it would completely circumvent the pipelines in Ukraine, give him free to invade, and still get paid by Europe. Of course, he wasn't depending on all the sanctions coming in as well. Now, we saw this in the United States. In 2019, legislation was passed by the House, Senate, and signed by President Trump to stop the construction of the Nord Stream 2, because they knew this is what he was going to do, invade Ukraine if this pipeline was completed. Both Republicans and Democrats both signed this. And of course, Trump signed it and enacted it at the time. Literally the same day it was passed, the same day Putin stopped his construction on that pipeline, because he knew that obviously this is going to not work very well. And this whole thing with Ukraine, basically his invasion of Ukraine, was not going to fly. All right. Now, at this point, he still had to use the Ukrainian pipelines to be able to seal the deal even more. In 2020, we actually placed more sanctions on the construction. And Putin knew full well that if he actually continued invasion from Crimea, then his pipeline, or the pipeline through Ukraine, would be finished, and he basically would become bankrupt. Enter Joe Biden, takes office. 4 days later, it's all it took was 4 days, he basically dropped those sanctions and said no more sanctions against Russia, and Putin resumed construction. Ready for that? Are you hear that? He basically gave Putin the free will to resume construction. With the construction of that pipeline, is the only thing was making it so Putin felt free to invade Ukraine. And they basically just took that out. In 2021, Biden officially waived both sets of sanctions and allowed Putin to have free access to build his pipeline as all he wanted to. Now in 2022, Senator Ted Cruz, which I like very much, by the way, reintroduced to have those sanctions replaced back in there again. Now, Biden at that time came to Capitol Hill, which he had never done before, and I don't think he's ever done it since, and personally lobbied and said, listen, do not reinstate these sanctions against Putin and against Russia. Even Poland at that time made an official statement saying, please, Congress, reinstate the sanctions because Putin will invade Ukraine if we don't. Even though, again, numerous Democrats and Republicans from both sides voted for this, there wasn't a single Democrat who voted for it now, and they shot down the new sanctions, and it was just a matter of days, by the way, Putin invaded Ukraine and sent his troops in. So Biden, in the very beginning anyway, sided with Russia in this whole situation. There's food for thought. FDR pushed to evade the boycotts already established. I don't know if you know that. There were boycotts against Nazi Germany, but he completely evaded those and actually let some companies and trade happen still with Nazi Germany. And of course, Biden pushed to stop the sanctions already established. Look at the parallels. Now, as the war continued and the U.S. was not involved, FDR enabled massive aid program to send military armament to fight against the Nazis from afar, specifically to Britain. What did Biden do? Enabled massive aid program to send military armament to fight against the Russians from afar through Ukraine. FDR was a globalist. He hated the United States as an isolationist. That was a result because of World War I. And he was the first one, as a president goes, I don't know if you know that, to actually envision the United Nations before World War II. Biden, also a globalist. He falls perfectly in line with the WEF on American indoctrination into the New World Order. Okay, now let's step things up a little bit and look at some parallels right before the wars. World War II, World War III. Before World War II, most Americans were for aid to Britain. And, just like right now, most Americans are for the aid going to Ukraine. Not all, but most. Before World War II, however, 81% of Americans were against actually sending troops, our own troops, to fight. What about now? What do you think the percent is? Put them in the comments below of Americans against sending our own troops to fight. I would say it's probably close to 81% personally. Also, there's ample evidence FDR wanted America in the war. And there's ample evidence Biden wants America in the war as well. This new war that's coming. If you haven't seen them, there's numerous video clips where it shows Biden, when he talks about war in the United States with Russia, he's got this big old gleaming smile on his face saying, if we're going to go to war, I'm going with you boys. And he's super excited about this. I mean, I really think he wants to be that president who leads America during a war, because I think a lot of presidents kind of want that anyway. Okay, so let's go ahead and step it up as far as the sinister aspect of this whole thing. FDR throughout history now has been accused by actually, as we uncover documents, that he knew full well that Japan had its eye not just on American soil, as basically history tells us, but actually on Pearl Harbor and the fleet base there itself. Japan wanted to attack that fleet, and FDR knew this fact. More so, I think a lot of people know this, that radar, which was brand new, practically new at the time, picked up a fleet of planes coming to Hawaii. They were told to shut it off and ignore what they saw. And even worse, as far as warning them, even if FDR kind of thought, it may be an attack in Hawaii, would actually warn them. The actual fleet there in Hawaii had no warning. They were never put on alert. There was a sleepy Sunday morning, and everybody thought everything was just fine. In my opinion, and many other experts too, by the way, that our servicemen and our fleet in Hawaii was sacrificed. It was a sacrifice to bring the United States into this war, a war that FDR wanted from the beginning. Now, we already talked about sanctions and Biden. Biden basically lifted the sanctions. Go ahead and build your pipeline. And now that Nord Stream 2 pipeline has been destroyed. In fact, rumors say it was actually a Navy SEAL team that went down and actually, demolition-wise, blew it up, destroyed it. Too little too late. The damage is already done. Ukraine's already been invaded, and Putin's doing what he can basically to secure energy there anyway. And because he's not selling any type of oil to Europe, it wasn't such a big rush for him at the end. But I wonder if that was his plan all along, Biden that is. You know what, go ahead and lift the sanctions, go ahead and build it, and then actually go in and demolish it separately anyway. Because when you can actually do it diplomatically, forget it. It's better to simply just destroy something that can possibly provocate Russia into a further attack into Ukraine, NATO, and the United States. So we can think about this, and we have to think about this. And the big point is coming up in just a second, There's many connections between FDR and Biden, far more than the ones I actually just mentioned to you. And they're far more than simply just both of them being liberal presidents. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't think it's about being a liberal president. I think it's about basically liberal presidents doing what they're told, or especially in Biden's case, using some strings to puppet him along, telling him what to do to actually further a larger plan. And that larger plan we're talking about is basically globalization, taking the sovereignty away from the United States. That's what I think is happening here. But either way, I think most of us will agree this is orchestrated. You may not agree, but I think most of us will decide that's the case. But here it is. Here's the biggest problem of them all. The United States, 81% of them wanted no part of World War II. We already had enough of war with World War I. And it took an attack on U.S. soil, a major attack on U.S. soil, to finally launch the United States into a global conflict. And so what's happening now? How does that compare with Biden? We have a president who wants the war. We have, a large percent. Most of Americans don't want to be any part of this. We're so tired of war. We're tired of Vietnam and the politics involved there, and Korea and World War II and the Gulf War. And it just seems to be America is a war machine. And I'll be the first to admit, America is a war machine because of our corrupt politicians. But as all this is happening and we're sending so much armament to Ukraine, Putin specifically is doing a lot of saber rattling, but even more so, nuclear saber rattling. He's actually now arming a lot of his ships with nuclear guided missiles. For what? He literally may take this opportunity to now send a nuclear attack somewhere in the world. Japan really didn't think that we were going to basically fight back in World War II because we're so isolationist. They thought the attack in Pearl Harbor would be able to say, okay, never mind, we're not going to have sanctions against you anymore either. It was all about sanctions. Putin may actually do the same thing. But here's what it comes down to. If he does a nuclear attack, my first question to you is, where's that attack going to be? Is it going to be on one of the NATO countries? Is it going to be on Ukraine? Is it going to be on the soil of the United States? Because understand, if FDR had intelligence, and here's the key, if FDR did have intelligence that attack of Pearl Harbor was going to happen, which history is showing that's true, what kind of evidence is going to be brushed under the rug about a Russian nuclear attack, maybe with a hypersonic missile on U.S. soil? They very well may say, hey guys, turn off the radar. Allow this to happen, because we know as Americans that may be the only thing that basically takes us to a state of, I don't want this war where I'm going to send my kids, to now I'm sending my sons and daughters off to fight. I'm still not one of them. I don't play into this orchestrated crap that they're doing, this whole game. But I think most Americans right now have a very bad taste of thinking of sending their son and daughter to war. But if there's a nuclear attack in America, especially on American soil, they may absolutely change their mind and be happy to sign off their kids in this last pawn stroke of sending them in there. But this whole thing, this whole situation, in my opinion, is not simply just about Russia and Ukraine, and it's not about Russia against NATO or the United States. It literally is our orchestrated plan in the United States, those elites and those higher ups, sending it so we have this massive, massive war to finally, as I said, take away the sovereignty of our country. Okay, I believe that is their plan and their ultimate goal, and they're working very slowly. But you know what? Again, it comes down to this. This is Goshen prepping. We need to be prepared, not prepared to send our sons and daughters, but we need to be prepared in case there's a nuclear attack. We need to be prepared in case we go to war, and we need to be able to actually have as much food and medicine and water and ammo and whatever we can to basically be ready for this. Because if history proves itself for anything, it is showing us loud and clear that we are heading into World War III.